The views and opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of Open Sky Radio. Please be advised.
Good day, everybody, and welcome to the Fire You Can't Put Out. With you as usual, my name is Melvin. I want to thank you for joining me again. Today we are taping on Wednesday, November 20th, 2013. We are celebrating episode 44 of what is currently a growing program, and I want to thank you. Today I want to begin with Obamacare Week 7. What we're learning about the Obamacare program, or the ACA, whatever your political bend is that it's rolling out not unlike Romneycare did in Massachusetts. So here's where we sit at this moment. Right now, as we reported last week, the error rate for the website is less than 1%, and 2/3 of the bugs have been worked out of the website, with, I think, somewhere between 20 and 30% more of the website that needs to be built. So we're really rolling right along. The numbers have began increasing again, and they are now, well, when they came in earlier this month, they were nowhere near what the administration wanted them to be, and they have now double where the administration wants them to be. So more people are getting through, and they are buying health care. So Obama came out last week and said, hey, for those of you that are worried about your canceled policies, you can keep them for another year. So Congress, please send me a bill that will allow people to keep their plans for another year. Fair. So Florida went ahead and jumped out ahead of everybody. Now, Florida's got a great plan, and it went like this. About 300,000 cancellation notices have been sent out by Florida Blue to customers who would have to switch out their existing plans to ones that would meet the Obamacare standards. But after President Obama, the announcement that he made of the administrative fix, this happened. According to the state's insurance commissioner, the insurance company is holding off on the cancellations. It should be noted as well that these cancellations did not mean people were going were not going without coverage. They were just being shifted into Affordable Care Act compliant plans. Do you see that? It's as simple as this. Those who've received cancellation notices will get new ones, offering them the option to remain on their existing plans through 2014 if they choose, which is pretty much what America's health insurance plans president, CEO Karen Ingegi said was an impossible thing to do. Not so apparently. So it's just that simple. Let them stay on their plans for another year. Just cancel the cancellation plan. Just don't send them out. Or tell them, hey, you can just go over to these plans that you probably qualify for. So the president doesn't just do things because he wants to. Contrary to popular belief, if a law is passed, if a policy is passed, it has to be passed by Congress. So what did Congress decide to do? Congress decided to repeal Obamacare for the 47th time. Representative Fred Upton's big dreams of having 100 Democrats abandon President Obama and Obamacare were realized when just 39 Democrats, mostly vulnerable freshmen and the usual Blue Dog suspects, voted for his insurance company Bill of Rights. Ladies and gentlemen, they're not even for your Bill of Rights, but the insurance companies. Oh yeah. So the plan passed 261 to 157, or as Speaker Boehner called it, a step on the road to repeal. So let's look at the administration fix. The administration fix informs customers of alternatives, explains where to find them, and notifies them of possible tax credits. The right-wing fix, the House fix, keeps things exactly as they were before Obamacare. The administration's fix and the proposals put forth by the House Democrats and Senator Mary Landrieu would only allow existing policies to be renewed, okay? So no new policies would be sold. Only the existing ones would be able to continue, okay? They twice put forward their plan. It was blocked by the Republicans. It was then offered again, but failed 187 to 230. So why did the Democrats' plan fail in the House? The important part of the administration and the Democrats' plans and why Republicans made sure that it failed is that they contain too many customer protections. They all require that insurers wanting to extend a customer's policy inform the customer of what they're missing out on by renewing their bad insurance. They would also require insurers to let the customers know how to find out about other options on the health insurance exchange, and that they might be eligible for federal help to pay for their new insurance. So it's just that simple. There are too many protections, so we're going to pass an insurance company's Bill of Rights. So where are the numbers on Obamacare? Obama's numbers have been falling as of late, and we've been anticipating those kind of numbers to come in because it has been a very public fight that he has been having over his major health care law. But the interest and the approval numbers of the ACA, well, those are going up. And next month we expect even better numbers with double the people being able to sign up for Obamacare now. Uninsured Americans are showing more interest in the ACA law despite technical problems that have hindered enrollment, according to a Reuters-Ipsos poll. The uninsured view the ACA more favorably since online marketplaces opened, 44% compared with 37% in September. According to the Reuters-Ipsos poll, it found that 56% opposed the program compared with 63% in September. Okay, a higher proportion of the uninsured also say they're interested in buying insurance on the exchanges, with 42% in October saying they were likely to enroll compared with 37% in September. The results have a credibility interval, a measure of accuracy of plus or minus 3.2 percentage points. The Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimates that up to 7 million people are likely to sign up for the health insurance exchanges. There was an issue with that. They said, well, with the early problems that Obamacare is having, that number might not happen. But now that most of those have been fixed, they say that we are back on track for that 7 million. Okay, let's see. So with all the things that have been going on with Obamacare, there has been a lot more talk about what else we could do instead of Obamacare. And not going back to the way things were, because see, the way things were, we were spending tons and tons of money, but a lot of people were still dying. And if you are a supposedly pro-life Christian nation, that should be unacceptable. So what is the other noise that's in the air? This comes to us from David Sirota over at TruthDig. Republicans argue that the signal is about government. More specifically, they claim the controversies validate their age-old assertions that government can't do anything right. Democrats countered that the signal and the noise is about universal health care, otherwise known as Medicare for all. One way to detect the signal is to consider the White House guest list. The president last week he staged a high-profile meeting with private health insurance executives. A reminder that Obamacare did not limit the power of insurance companies as a single-payer system would. The second, Obamacare-related congressional hearings, despite the proceedings, you didn't hear much about actual health care. And they've been holding a lot of these proceedings, but none of it is about actual health care. Money. This is what rules Washington, and this is what has run your health care for some time. But this is also why everybody's getting sick and dying, okay? The top priority of the insurance companies is not to help people, okay? Back when Obamacare was being negotiated, Congress could have circumvented the private insurance industry by simply expanding Medicare to cover everybody. Medicare isn't perfect, of course, but it remains one of the most popular institutions in America because its single-payer model guarantees access to decent, cost-effective health care rather than just meager health insurance. It also does a good job of preventing profit-taking middlemen from getting in between patients and their physicians. And isn't that the meme that we have been being fed for some time, getting in between patients and their doctors? Something monstrous has happened in Wisconsin, and it was about a year ago that we had And the whole world was watching, obviously. But Scott Walker decided, after he became governor, that he was going to strip all the unions of their rights. Why? Because that's it. Okay? So it's been a year since he also took a prank call from somebody pretending to be one of the Koch brothers. Okay? In his new book, Unintimidated, which is coming out now because Walker clearly is running for president. Walker says the incident showed him that God was speaking to him. This comes to us from Amanda Turkle over at HuffPo. The call from Ian Murphy, who is editor of the Buffalo Beast, an alternative publication in Buffalo, New York, occurred on February 22nd. Murphy, posing as Koch, asked Walker if he would be planting some troublemakers in the peaceful crowds that were protesting his anti-union legislation in Madison. Quote, "It was a really dumb thing to say," writes Walker in his book. "The fact is we never considered putting troublemakers in the crowd to discredit the protesters. But as the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reported in a 20-minute press conference the day after the phone call was released, Walker admitted having considered that option." After he went back to his office that day, he says, "There's a devotional book on leadership by John Maxwell in my office, and the title for that day was The Power of Humility, the Burden of Pride." Still quoting here, "I looked up and said, 'I hear you, Lord.'" What most agitated anti-Walker activists was the fact that Walker was willing to take a call from Koch in the first place, when he wouldn't even return calls of Democratic state senators looking to negotiate. In other words, he was plotting anti-union strategies privately with Koch instead of working out the policy with the legislature. Quote, "If I had been really doing the Koch's bidding, I would have recognized immediately that it was not Koch on the other end of the line. Instead, I spoke at length with the fake Koch." So then we get this about a month ago, and I'm my apologies for not reporting on this earlier, but I didn't want to give you a snippet of news and nothing else. But okay, this from October 23rd, according to a report in that same newspaper, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, a special prosecutor has been retained to investigate a wide range of issues in Governor Walker's state of Wisconsin, including the recall election that captured the attention of not just those in the state, but across the nation. It was supposedly proof, him winning the election, that the hard-right ideologue Walker was actually popular in the state and that his aggressive anti-labor, anti-public worker policies were working just fine. So now we have the rest of the story. The Wall Street Journal reported on Friday that Governor Scott Walker's campaign offices and more than 24 conservative groups have been subpoenaed by that same special prosecutor, their records and fundraising information related to a series of recall attempts in 2011 and 2012 that targeted Walker and Republican state senators. I mentioned his book, Unintimidated, okay? The Wall Street Journal reported that about 30 groups had received subpoenas as part of the ongoing investigation. It named 9 targets: Walker's campaign, the Wisconsin Club for Growth, American Crossroads, founded by Karl Rove, the Republican Governors Association, the Republican Party of Wisconsin, Americans for Prosperity Wisconsin, Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, the State's Chamber of Commerce, the Wisconsin Family Action, and the League of American Voters. At least a couple of those are Koch-funded groups. Says this coming from these groups that worked for his election. He says he's not doing the bidding of Koch, really, because a couple of these groups are his groups, are the Koch brothers groups. Okay, those affiliated with the named groups either declined to comment or did not respond to messages seeking comment that were left over the weekend and on Monday. But Republican candidates, special interest groups, and political committees outspent Democrats $84.5 million to $52.6 million in the governor's race alone. Walker and his supporters outspent Democrats $58.7 million to $21.9 million, according to Democracy Campaign's allies. Okay, this is what's referred to as the John Doe investigation. Hey, during an earlier inquiry that resulted in 6 criminal convictions that were from when Walker held a separate office. The investigation began in May 2010, and 3 of those convicted were were former aides to Walker when he worked as Milwaukee County executive. A Walker appointee and major campaign donor were also convicted. Walker has declined to comment about the investigation, calling it a distraction. Walker is up for re-election next year in 2014. Let me say this. If your policies are really so fabulous and really so great, did you really have to outspend your opponents 2-1 in order to win the election? Now, I know the idea is that there's a liberal media out there, but to be honest, it doesn't exist. And there are conservative outlets, but here's the real name of the game. With so many conservative outlets, if conservatives really want to talk to conservatives, they can go to just conservative outlets. There's really not a huge liberal media outlet, okay? But the ones that are supposedly liberal, well, they're very careful whenever they talk to Republicans because they don't want to lose access to them, and that's become very clear to me, okay? So, all right, so now I want to talk about how they plan on subverting democracy in Wisconsin. Okay, so with the governor's election being next year, Walker clearly wanting to run for president, okay, Wisconsin Republicans are working to end early voting on the weekend. They just want to cut out all weekend voting, okay? No early voting on weekends. On November 14th, a measure passed the state assembly that would require county clerks to limit early voting to 40 hours per week between 7:30 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, according to the Washington Post. So, only during the hours when most people are at work, only during that time are you allowed to vote. So, unless you work the off hours, or you don't work, you know, you can go between 7:30 and 5 and vote, but otherwise, absolutely not. So, why are they doing this? Most of the reasoning that we're getting with respect to limiting voting rights is that they're trying to reduce fraud. So how does this reduce fraud? State Senator Glenn Groffman is sponsoring a Senate version of the bill and said between early voting, mail absentee, and voting the day of election, anybody who can't vote with all those options, they've really got a problem, he said. I really don't think that they care that much about voting in the first place, right? Well, if they didn't, you wouldn't have to kill early voting. So it's pretty obvious that they do. So is this about fraud? Groffman says, well, the effort is really meant to establish uniformity. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what we politely call BS. This isn't the only recent GOP attempt to change elections in the Badger State. The Wisconsin Assembly recently voted 53-39 to approve a Republican-sponsored proposed constitutional amendment to restrict, wait for it, recall elections. Reuters reported earlier, under the proposed amendment, elected state officials could be recalled only if they have been charged with a crime punishable by at least 1 year in prison or if there's probable cause that they have violated the state's code of ethics. Walker has promoted changes to how elections are conducted in Wisconsin, saying in 2012 he thought voting would be much better, quote unquote, without same-day registration. So he's up for election next year, and he's reducing the ways that you are able to vote because, and it's not a secret, the Republicans have said it any number of times, the less people that vote, the better their chances of winning. And in Wisconsin, Walker is hoping that kind of thing takes him all the way to the White House. Restrict the vote in his state to become governor again, run for president, restrict the voters across the entire nation, become president of the United States. All right, I want to get into the Supreme Court. There have been a few decisions this week, but I don't want to get into any of those. I don't think any of those were big enough, and the ones that were huge, I'm certainly certain you've already heard about them, okay? I want to talk about Scalia and Thomas. This comes to us from Politics USA by R. Muse. For 3 years, at least, there have been nagging questions about Clarence Thomas and Antonin Scalia's close ties to right-wing organizations and their funding mechanism, the Koch brothers. Okay? But without a rigorous code of ethics in place, there was little chance that they would be held to account or be forced to stop. 2 days ago, Clarence Thomas was at it again when he appeared at a Federalist Society fundraiser as a featured speaker that two other High Court justices, Antonin Scalia and Samuel Alito, also attended. It is a violation of Canon 4C of the Code of Conduct for U.S. judges who are forbidden from being a guest of honor, or featured on the program of a fundraising event. But because Thomas, a federal judge, sits on the nation's highest court, apparently he is exempt from adhering to any code of conduct. Congressional Representative Louise Slaughter is mounting another attempt to hold Thomas and all high court justices to the same ethical standards as every other federal judge, and initiated a petition to Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts to hold Thomas to account for defying the judicial code of conduct. Chief John Roberts claimed the code plays the same role for the Supreme Court as it does for other federal judges and other justices that have to adhere to it. But Thomas and Scalia have set themselves above ethics rules because, after all, they're obviously Koch property. Scalia and Thomas, dig this, attended a secret Koch billionaire policy meeting in 2010 for the Citizens United ruling prior to the Citizens United ruling, which they voted in favor of, which then turned corporations into people, money into speech, and then turned our elections over to the highest bidders. Thomas's wife, Ginny, is also a highly paid conservative operative and teabag advocate, which drove Clarence to accidentally conceal his wife's conservative belief tank income on financial disclosures. Representative Louise Slaughter introduced the legislation, but it went nowhere in the Republican-controlled House. So the Republicans in the House also believe that we don't need to hold that court to a higher standard. You know, with Obamacare, one of the first things I began hearing, and I can tell that the Republicans are generally all the same and all speak with essentially the same voice, was they said, you can't pass Obamacare because it's socialism and Nazism and all blah, blah, blah. And then once it passed, they go, hey, if we have to follow this law, Obama should have to follow this law too. Did you hear that Obama secretly wrote up legislation and passed it that said that he doesn't have to adhere to his own law? By the way, the president can't do that. The president doesn't pass legislation, and he doesn't have to do that because, see, you're the president and congressional members have the same thing. They get to choose their plans from a variety of plans as well. And then they, courtesy of you and I, they get those plans at least partially paid for by us. Obamacare is the same thing. So they already have it. So to say, well, no. And you're being dishonest, and you can't say those, and it's amazing that anybody believes these kinds of things. So the House is not passing anything popular. And is popular. Immigration is popular. So what are they passing? The Federal Lands, Jobs, and Energy Securities Act. Isn't that a lovely name? Federal Lands, Jobs, and Energy Securities Act. Gosh, it just sounds like we're all going to be employed, right? And we're going to have all this energy, and it's going to be so nice. The bill, introduced by Representative Doug Lamborn, Republican from Colorado, is broad legislation designed to make it much easier for oil and gas companies to obtain permission to drill on public lands. If signed into law, the legislation would automatically approve onshore drilling permits if the U.S. Department of Interior failed to act on them in 60 days. If an individual does not like a proposed drilling project and would like to oppose it, he or she would have to pay a $5,000 fee to officially protest. Okay? They would have to pay $5,000 to file an official protest. In addition, Lamborn's proposed bill would direct the DOI to begin commercial leasing for the development of oil shale, a controversial type of production that has been largely banned in the United States since President Herbert Hoover prohibited the leasing of federal lands for oil shale. Oil shale production would emit 4 times more carbon pollution than producing conventional gasoline. Credited to the amount of energy it takes to get hydrocarbons out of the rock. Okay, it's going to harm the environment, short-circuit critical reviews, establish barriers to people wishing to challenge the oil and gas company, even if it is in their own backyard. So they say, hey, you in the oil and gas industry, the people's land is your land. And if it spills into your backyard or it destroys your land, or you think that it might, you're going to have to pay $5,000 in order to protest it. My. So, of the rich, by the rich, and for the rich. And that has become even more apparent in our economic classes. And of course, the lower classes are growing faster than they ever have before. Nearly 50 million Americans are now living below the poverty line, with 80% of the entire U.S. population living near or below that poverty line. It translates to a full 80% of the population struggling with joblessness, near poverty, or reliance on government assistance to help make ends meet. In September, the Associated Press pointed to the survey data that told of an increasingly widening gap between the rich and the poor. According to a revised census measure released Wednesday, the number 3 million higher than what the official government numbers imagine are also due to out-of-pocket medical costs and work-related expenses. Some other findings revealed that food stamps helped 5 million people barely reach above the poverty line. That means that the actual poverty rate is even higher, as without such aid, poverty rate would rise from 16% to 17.6%. Okay? Sheldon Danziger of the University of Michigan said, given current economic conditions, poverty will not be substantially reduced unless the government does more to help the working poor. Meanwhile, the Democrats and Republicans are negotiating about just how much these programs should be cut. And here's the thing. It's both parties. It's pretty rare I'll say that. But it's largely the Republicans. But both the Republicans and the Democrats are talking about how much more we should cut these programs. You know what they're not talking about cutting? Corporate welfare. And trust me, it's the same thing. There's this idea that with welfare, that we are creating dependency when we provide people with the temporary assistance that they need because they lost their job or because they're not getting enough hours. They just had a child, and hey, if you're against abortion, they just had that child, you really should want to help them out. But there's this idea that it's going to create a neediness. It's going to, people depending on the government, and what's going to be their motivation to go somewhere else and do something else. Not so. I don't know anybody that just wants to sit around and collect the government check. Yeah, the person on welfare that sits around just waits for the government check to come, I believe that they are not unlike Ronald Reagan's welfare queens. Ronald Reagan's welfare queens. Say that fast 3 times. Which is to say, go looking for them. They don't exist. Ronald Reagan, why can't I say that today, made the point one time, or a couple times, when he was on the mic, that there's this black woman out there. Notice what he used is this black woman out there who's driving her Cadillac to cash her welfare check. And the media goes, whoa, we have to find this woman. And after all kinds of investigation, they never found her. It's because she didn't exist. Now, with respect to people that are on public assistance, perhaps they do exist, but their numbers are insanely small. The amount of fraud that happens inside the TANF system is right around 1%, maybe a little less, okay? It's teeny tiny. It doesn't have much fraud at all. Now, let's talk about corporate welfare. So, oil companies get tons of tax breaks, not the least of which is one called a depleted oil well allowance, okay? as they're drilling, and the oil and the think of a full well. Think of it like a bucket. Okay. And as you're taking the liquid out of the ground, eventually the oil, there's oil all the way down deep. Okay. The oil at the top is the cheapest to drill for because it's right there. And as you move down that well, it gets more and more expensive to drill because you need to use more and more energy. And so they get a tax break for those. And eventually, after it becomes unprofitable and they cap the wells, even though there's still oil in them, they get a tax break for that. Not to mention the price that we're paying at the pump. And by the way, I'm glad gas prices are going down, but here's the thing. We're not paying for the externalities that come with oil. Okay? All the poison being pumped into the air. Okay? These oil companies are making tons and tons of profit. Okay? And there's very little work being done with respect to alternatives. But if we took away their tax breaks for destroying the environment, and they had to pay for their externalities, which means raising gas prices to where they would have to cover all the poison that they're pumping into the air, put it into the medical system, or just put it into a private company that would help us clean the air out. They'd have to, we'd have to have filters on our cars or whatever it took. You take away those two things, and gasoline goes to over $10 a gallon, you will hear talk of electric cars non-stop. The oil industry is not a profitable industry. Yeah, they're making tons of money right now, but they wouldn't without corporate welfare or if they had to pay to clean all the waste that they're pumping into, well, now the ground with fracking and pumping into the air. That's my piece. I grew up a little bit on assistance, and once I got out on my own, I never want to be back on it because it really doesn't pay that much. It's barely enough to live. Sometimes it wasn't even that much. We still have to go to the food bank, but to help people and complain that there's something wrong with those people and say nothing about corporate welfare queens, I digress. Let's get to another monster-sized corporation that's screwing their employees. Oops, did I say that? A Cleveland Wal-Mart store is holding a food drive for its own employees. Please donate food items so associates in need can enjoy Thanksgiving dinner, reads a sign accompanied by several plastic bins. When questioned about the seeming paradox, why not pay your employees enough so that they can feed themselves? Walmart actually responded. A company spokesman defended the food drive, telling the plain dealer that it is evidence that the employees care about each other. Did you catch that? It's evidence the employees care about each other, but it's not evidence that Walmart cares about them. Walmart turned a $15.7 billion profit last year. Okay? Walmart has had to turn to the American people in the form of, follow me, government subsidies like SNAP in order to feed its employees, realizing how inadequate such subsidies have become, especially in the light of recent cutbacks. It now sees the virtue and necessity of appealing to its customers and employees. Even Walmart, a $15 billion company, relies on the welfare system to feed their employees. They could simply pay them more, but that's fascism, Nazism, all the rest. Okay? Communism, socialism. Speaking of which, a socialist, this is crazy. A socialist was just elected to the Seattle City Council. This blew my mind. Now, I myself, real quick, socialism, pure and simple socialism, there's various kinds of socialism. Pure and simple socialism is the abolishment of all private property. That's it. So right away, you'll take note. People screaming that Obama's a socialist, dumb. Just dumb. They have no idea what they're talking about. And so let's talk about Kashma Sawant. Okay? She is what is called a socialist alternative. The Socialist Alternative Party. I'm just now learning about this party, so I can't give you the history on them. But they do have a website, socialistalternative.org, I believe it is. Just Google it, Socialist Alternative. Seattle workers voted her into office, okay? They voted her to the city council, and she defeated 16-year incumbent Richard Conlon. Now, he has given his concession speech. Okay, Sawant's win has surprised many. Conlon was backed by the city's political establishment, and on election night, she trailed by 4 percentage points. She wasn't a veteran politician. She had only run in one previous campaign, which she lost, which was last year. But in the days following the election night, her votes continued to grow as they counted more and more votes from I imagine, the more liberal parts of Seattle, if you can imagine that. I don't think socialism makes most people in Seattle afraid, Conlon said Friday. While city council races are technically nonpartisan, Sawant made sure people knew that she was running as a socialist. Sawant, a 41-year-old college economics professor, first drew attention as part of a local Occupy Wall Street protest in late 2011. Here's her platform. She backed efforts to raise the minimum wage to $15, called for rent control in the city where rental prices keep climbing, and supports a tax on millionaires to help fund a public transit system and other services. Research shows that no socialist candidate has won a citywide office in the past 100 years. Congrats to her. That's going to be an interesting city to watch. They've already raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour in SeaTac, and they just elected a socialist to city council. Seattle is really leading the way on change right now. Keep an eye on them, because we're certainly going to here at TFYCPO. Meet the newest anti-fracking activist, Pope Francis. I really should have chime music for this guy because he seems to make it into just about every episode. But I love the change that is going to happen with this guy. Remember, over 1 billion Catholics. This guy leads over 1 billion Catholics. Follow me here. This comes from Caitlin Fawcett over at pdamerica.org. On Monday, November 11th, the Pope was photographed with environmental activists holding T-shirts with anti-fracking slogans. The photographs were taken after a meeting in the Vatican on Monday in which the Pope spoke with a group of Argentine environmental activists to discuss fracking and water contamination. He reportedly told the group that he is preparing an encyclical, which is a letter addressing a part of the Catholic doctrine about nature, humans, and environmental pollution. In an August agreement that was drawn up between the Argentine government and Chevron to develop shale and oil gas, drilling for these resources often requires, hydraulic fracturing or fracking, which is criticized by opponents for relying on toxic fluid and posing water contamination risks. Real quick, fracking. They send a pipe, they drill, and they send a pipe into the ground, and there's lots of industrial waste liquids that exist, and there's not a good way to get rid of them without polluting, which is fine. They're polluting anyway, and they take these liquids and they pump them through a pipe. Now, this is just a real quick oversight of this. They pump it through this pipe at an incredibly high pressure, okay? And they blow apart the shale that's way deep into the ground, okay? And then that releases the natural gas, and they capture the natural gas, and then that's what they sell. But this does two things. It contaminates the groundwater because now it gets rid of their waste that they want to get rid of, their waste liquids, but it contaminates the groundwater and it blows apart the shale. It's blowing apart the inside of the earth, which has led to more earthquakes, okay? According to one report of the meeting, His Holiness' concern was clear when hearing about the Chevron deal in Argentina and other environmental disputes in the region. Sarah Palin recently said she was shocked by the pontiff's liberal statements. Wait till she hears about his new role as the face of Argentina's environmentalist movement. Sarah Palin recently came out and apologized for calling him a liberal, but said, hey, you people out there need to do your homework because it may just be the liberal media painting him as a liberal. No, Sarah, no, it's not true. This guy's an actual liberal. He's a liberal, much like that long-haired Jewish peacenik that you say that you follow. Jesus. Pope Francis also suspended the quote-unquote Bishop of Bling, he was known as. On November 13th, we found out that Pope Francis suspended the German Bishop of Bling, Franz Peter, for allegedly spending $41 million US dollars equivalent to spiff up his official residence in Limburg, Germany. In a delicious twist, the Pope wants to convert the residence into a soup kitchen and refugee center for the homeless. According to the UK Independent, the residence is like an inherited sin which the bishop has left in his wake, said a spokesman for the Caritas Organization for the Homeless. People who seek sanctuary with us could be given food in the residence, he added. Turning the complex into a refugee center would follow the practice of a former Limburg bishop who housed a refugee family from Eritrea while he moved into a residence for novice priests. The Church Commission said that they are going to investigate the cost of the renovation and will determine if Franz Peter violated church law regarding the use of church money. This is what's being referred to as the Pope Francis effect, and it's being felt around the world. The attendance at his weekly appearances in St. Peter's Square are near record-breaking. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Pope that we have been waiting for. And I don't know if he goes around on tour to different cities in America and speaks. He should, because there's quite a few Catholics here. And I, as an atheist, will turn out to hear this gentleman speak if he winds up in my neck of the woods. I'm not a religious man, but I like the cut of the new Pope's jib. Pope theme music coming soon. So let us get into our DMs. Let's shout out against a Democrat, if we may, right now. A Democratic state representative in Hawaii says he wanted to do something constructive to solve the state's homeless situation. So he has taken to the streets and is destroying people's possessions with a sledgehammer. This has been pretty widely reported, but I wanted to get into this a little bit myself. State Representative Tom Brower told Hawaii News Now, "I want to do something practical that will really clean up the streets." Brower showed the TV news crew how he scours the streets for shopping carts that the homeless people use to transport their belongings and then uses a sledgehammer to destroy them. "I also create a situation where those carts can't be pushed around the city," he says, and I think that that's a good thing. Mental Health America of Hawaii Executive Director Maria Grams said that Brower's tactics were sending the wrong message. His message to the public, quote, is that it's okay to commit acts of violence against homeless people, against vulnerable people. It's okay for vigilante justice, she noted. Brower insisted to Hawaii News Now that he had not yet taken a shopping cart out of the hands of a homeless person, but he also didn't rule it out. In the end, the sledgehammer-wielding lawmaker did not explain how destroying shopping carts would reduce homelessness, and this reporter would like to point out that it also does not show how you are cleaning up the streets, because now there are homeless people everywhere, their stuff is everywhere, and pieces of shopping cart are everywhere. I don't particularly understand what he's doing. Watch this space, because we're going to report on it when we figure it out. Martin Bashir said something about, well, speaking of big dummies, Sarah Palin, okay? He made these remarks last Saturday. Now, she was promoting her War on Christmas book, okay? And we reported on this last week, and she compared borrowing money from China to slavery, okay? Martin Bashir said, given her well-established reputation as a world-class idiot, it's hardly surprising that she would choose to mention slavery in a way that is abominable to anyone who knows anything about its barbaric history. Perhaps, he said, Palin should try to find out what slavery was really like. He suggested that she would be a good subject for a form of abuse derived by West Indian slaver Thomas Thistlewood. Thistlewood conceived a particularly sickening punishment for a slave named Darby who was caught eating the sugar cane that he was supposed to be harvesting. The plantain owner had him well flogged and pickled, which is to say that Darby was whipped and then salt and other irritants were rubbed into his whip cuts. Then he made another slave defecate into Darby's mouth. This became known as Darby's dose. She confirms, this is quoting Martin Bashir now, she confirms if anyone truly qualified for a dose of discipline from Thomas Thistlewood, she would be an outstanding candidate. Yeah, you heard that right. He suggested that she learn a little bit more about slavery and that somebody should take a dump in her mouth. This created a gigantic uproar right away, and Beshear went on to apologize. Sarah Palin, he said he was out of line and he should not said it, and I have looked at quite a few message boards about this incident, and most people don't think he should have apologized. I certainly don't think that he should have apologized, but he's trying to remain a class act. But by citing a very specific piece of history, he is helping educate the very ignorant Sarah Palin about slavery. And on to the next one. So, there is a governor's race right now going on in Texas. We'll get to that in a minute. Young conservatives of Texas plan catch an illegal immigrant game. Okay, the Young Conservatives of Texas have planned a catch an illegal immigrant game on the campus of the University of Texas. YCT will be having a catch an illegal immigrant event coming up. The details of this game are as follows. There will be several people walking around the UT campus with the label illegal immigrant on their clothing. Any UT student who catches one of these illegal immigrants and brings them back to our table will receive a $25 gift card. The event is being organized by Lorenzo Garcia, who is reportedly working for Texas gubernatorial candidate Greg Abbott. For their part, the University of Texas issued a warning of serious consequences for anybody participating. Let's keep with this story, okay? So, Greg Abbott, the Republican candidate for Texas governor, has responded to the news about the catch an illegal immigrant game. In a statement, Garcia said that he was concerned that the university will retaliate against them and that the protest against the event could create a safety issue for the volunteers. University President Bill Powers also released a statement saying that the proposed YCT event is completely out of line with the values that we espouse at the University of Texas at Austin. And then on to Greg Abbott. Our campaign, I'm quoting now, has no affiliation with this repugnant effort. Illegal immigration and the failed policies of the Obama administration are no joking matter. You see that? How it's Obama's fault, right? Without pointing out that Obama has been throwing more illegal immigrants out of the country than any president has in recent history. Okay? But I digress. Conservatives should not stoop to the level of liberals whose shenanigans at the Texas Capitol this summer, including chants of Hail Satan during Senator Davis' filibuster to allow abortions after 5 months, did nothing but sidetrack the Texas legislator. He's connecting Wendy Davis to say, he's saying that people were saying Hail Satan while she was doing, you remember this really long filibuster that Wendy Davis did? Well, now he's saying, hey, you know what? Nod, nod, wink, wink. Satanism, you know. And Wendy Davis, by the way, is who he's running against. That's the Democrat in the race. So, illegal immigrants. Obama's been throwing them out of the country at an alarming rate. Okay? But if you turn to any conservative media outlet, they will tell you that he has been letting them in and maybe even letting some of them stay in the White House with him. Such is not the case. What has been happening with Reaganomics over the past 30 plus years is we have had a lot of unfair trade policies that have allowed a lot of our jobs to be sent overseas. And people have noticed the middle class shrinking and those jobs going overseas. But rather than saying that those jobs going away are the result of our unfair trade policies, they've said, it's the illegal immigrants. Get them. So, which is why this young man in Texas, at this Texas college, went ahead and said, hey, let's play a game called Catch the Illegal Immigrant, right? Without pointing out the fact that really immigrants aren't the problem when they come here. They're looking to work essentially just like anybody else is, and they're not taking anybody's jobs. They're being given that job. Okay? So, I want to talk about Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders in the last week has decided to blow everybody's mind. This comes to us from Amanda Turkle over at the Huffington Post. Okay. First, let me say, on Friday, November 15th, during the Brunch with Bernie segment on the Thom Hartmann program, he made mention that he wants to make sure that there is a strong progressive voice in the 2016 presidential field, and he's willing to jump in if nobody else does. Okay, from the Post. Okay, there are people in this world. Oh no, excuse me. This comes from the Berlin Free Press. There are people in this world who, ever since they were 12 years of age, they decided that they want to be the president of the United States. This is honestly not me, Sanders told the Burlington Free Press, and there it is. Anyone who really wants to be a president is slightly crazy because this is an unbelievably difficult job given the crisis that this country faces today, unquote. Nevertheless, Sanders said that there needs to be a 2016 candidate who will go after Wall Street, focus on poverty and the collapse of the middle class, address global warming, and oppose cuts to Social Security and Medicare, all issues that Sanders has taken on while in the Senate. According to the Free Press, Sanders says he's willing to consider making a run if no one else with progressive views similar to his ends up taking the plunge. He said he won't take any money from Wall Street or corporate America. That's very interesting, but also very hard. I'll explain here in a minute. This is going to lead into my final thought. While Sanders has not closed the door on a presidential run, he hasn't opened it very wide either. In an interview with Playboy last month, Sanders says that he was 99% sure that he's not going to run. So there's a 1% chance that he's going to run. In recent days, Senator Elizabeth Warren, the Democrat from Massachusetts, has been mentioned as a possible 2016 contender. Sanders says that he would be happy with a Warren candidacy. So let me point this out. If Elizabeth Warren decides to run, he won't jump in. I've been listening to Bernie Sanders for some time. I've been following him. Okay. If Bernie runs, Bernie will win. This is my final thought, ladies and gentlemen. If Bernie runs, Bernie will win. There's no doubt in my mind. Okay? There is a trade policy right now that is being negotiated called the TPP, and Obama has said that it's the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and Obama has said that he's going to sign it if it makes it to his desk. For a while now, our jobs have been chipped away at and sent overseas. I've made mention of this many a times. And it's most of it's because of these unfair trade policies that have been passed by the last, say, 5 presidents. Okay, we're talking Reagan, Bush the first, Clinton, Bush the second, and now Obama, who is willing to sign the TPP. That's where your jobs are going. The TPP would be the final nail in the coffin for the middle class. Now, if it passes, it is my belief that it will lead to absolutely radical change. But there will be a lot of suffering leading up to that change. So, Bernie Sanders has said that he is maybe willing to run for president. Okay, he's sticking his toe in the water right now. Okay. There is a belief, and I'm one who subscribes to this belief, that whichever party, the Republican or Democratic Party, whichever party decides to take on trade and get rid of all of those trade deals, all of those unfair trade deals that have chipped away at our jobs for over 30 years now, whatever party decides to do that will win every election from here on out, because doing that would grow the middle class in an amazing way. When we, on the left side of the aisle, talk about returning America to its former glory, we talk about the growth period after World War II. When Republicans talk about returning it to its former glory, well, you got to go somewhere to the mid-1800s to find out what they want. He's also said that he will not take corporate money. That's a very important thing. It's also on the one hand, and I believe this as well, it will also make his run for president very hard. Okay? It will be a hard-fought fight, but we can win it. Obama, as mildly progressive as he's been, Obama took a ton of money from Wall Street, and as president, went ahead and decided not to call for too many major changes on them. He's gone relatively easy on Wall Street. Now, he's done some things I like, but when it comes to Wall Street, I'm absolutely not happy. So, if Bernie Sanders runs, he does it without corporate money, and he does it on the platform of changing our trade policies. See, back during the Clinton re-election, Ross Perot got into the race. And I was reading something by Tom Hartman that pointed this out to me. When Ross Perot got into that race, he talked about the sucking sound, right? All the jobs going down to Mexico, right? Everyone thought he was a funny little man. And he talked about that. And when the election, of course he lost, but when he came up, he got about 20% of the vote. Now, that's pretty good for a third-party candidate. We haven't had any third-party candidates that has happened with. Okay, no strong third-party candidates that were talking about changing our trade deals. He did so, and he got really far in that presidential election. Now, mind you, we were only into our third president that was chipping away at American jobs. Okay, we are now on president number 5, chipping away at American jobs. So, if Bernie Sanders steps in and says, hey, those unfair trade deals, that will go away. Okay? I don't know if you remember that election, Clinton only won with like 30-some%. But it was good enough because he had more than the other two people in the race. Bernie Sanders can and will win. 2016 is a long way away. And quite honestly, it annoys me the fact that anybody's even talking about it right now. But Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are the kind of progressives that I have been waiting for. And Bernie has mentioned himself how hard it's going to be not taking corporate money. Bernie, from us here at TFYCPO, we have got your back. We will donate money to you. We will burn up this microphone, burn up blogs, stand out on the street corner with signs, overtake our local Democratic Party. We will do whatever it takes to get you whatever you need in order to win the presidency of the United States. I've been listening to the Brunch with Bernie segment for a number of years now, and I don't know if many of you know what it is, but he actually takes cold phone calls from people on a national radio show and gives them straight up answers. He's been that open to the people. We need that kind of person as president. And I say, if Bernie Sanders from Vermont wins, Bernie Sanders independent, if he runs, Bernie Sanders will win. Run, Bernie, run. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us for episode 44 of The Fire You Can't Put Out. As usual, I want to thank the good folks over at Open Sky Radio for putting us out there, iTunes for putting us up as well, Kevin for working with me on the show and doing production, Angela, I'm still working on the board. My goodness, we're going to get you back here one of these days. And I want to thank you, the listener, for tuning in every week. It is a great joy to me to put this show out, and I'm going to work pretty hard to put out next week's show on Wednesday as well, so as to have it out before the Thanksgiving holiday. That way I can just take a couple of days off and actually be with my family. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your continued support. We are the fire you can't put out, and we will prevail. Despair is not an option, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, and good day.